Hey, welcome to the Glen Podcast, the best podcast you'll listen to all day. Sponsored by Mission Blueprint. Question for you.
Is it about Yellowstone? I want to all about Yellowstone.
It's not about Yellowstone. I haven't watched Yellowstone for a while.
Kevin Costner's going away.
Well,
supposedly.
What do you mean going away?
He's out of it.
Out of what?
He's going to be out of the next season.
Oh, he can't be out of it.
That's what they say.
It'll never work.
Yeah, and Garth Brooks is getting the divorce.
Another one?
Yeah. Him and Trisha getting divorced after 25 years.
Well, that leads right into today's topic. Is there a new feminism brewing?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. You think there is? We haven't talked about this really at all.
No.
What is okay, let me just ask you. What do you think a new feminism looks like?
There is no feminism. With the way our culture is going now, there is no feminism. If a guy can identify as being a girl and has the same equal rights to use the same restroom, same locker room, compete in the same sports, feminism is dead. It's dead.
So then masculinity is dead.
Absolutely.
So we need the ladies to bring this back around.
Oh, if they want to claim their ground, they've got to stand up and take their ground because they fought for it. They fought hard for years because, good, bad, or otherwise, the way our country was founded, they didn't even have voting rights. They didn't have land ownership rights. And that was probably an old tradition that came over from Europe. But they fought tooth and nail to stand on equal footing and equal right. And this next whatever we're living in right now, they have completely undermined 40, 50, 80 years of equality and recognition and acceptance and reconditioning of generational thinking. And it is all being eroded away.
Yeah, if you go back 100, 125 years and you transport those women to our day today,
they are hurting some people.
Well, yeah, they would be like, what is wrong with you?
Yes.
They would say of several things. Why would you want to be in the workforce? I don't understand that. And why would you wear those clothes? I mean...
and they would look at little boys going, you want to wear that? What's wrong with you?
Yeah. And back then, the divorce rate was under 3%.
Right. I'll be honest. I'm not that old. But you go back to my high school, middle school days. I come to school with pink hair. Somebody was beating my butt behind the school bus barn. And it wasn't going to be pretty. And when I went in from lunchtime, I wasn't telling who did it either.
Yeah, who had pink hair? But even going back 60 years, ladies and gentlemen, I said 120.
When you were in middle school?
Go back 60 years when I was 10. Just kidding. True feminism is not what feminism is right now. True feminism back then was women should have the right, if they want to go to college and get a job.
Own land.
Own land. I have who has a problem with that? I don't have a problem with that. But I think there is a new feminism brewing. And I'm not basing this off of what I'm going to say next because I don't think that would be fair at all.
Okay, keep going.
But what got me on this topic is I was watching a video. I think it was a commercial. And maybe you've seen it. And it's this woman. And I wouldn't say she was extraordinarily pretty, but I think she was...
Beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
Pretty enough.
Right.
But she was dressed so well. Everything was covered. She had great clothes on. And she was walking down the street. And I don't know if this is a commercial, but she was walking down the sidewalk like in New York City. And everyone turned to look at her and go, wow, that's beautiful. And she was completely covered. And that got me thinking, I wonder if there's a new feminism around the corner. Because I think women are sick and tired of what feminism has turned them or so many women into. And they don't want it because that at the core of who a woman is, not what is a woman, because I think you and I know what a woman is. But ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't seen the Matt Walsh movie, it's worth watching because you will scratch your head because people cannot answer the question, what is a woman?
Well, they're afraid to be politically incorrect instead of being direct.
Yeah, so at its core, women are nurturers. That's who they are. I mean, if you go back and study sexual morality, Christian sexual morality, it's very obvious that men, we are givers. Right? We give. We give the seed, literally,
Yeah.
and the women are receivers,
Right.
right? And they're nurturers. And why would we want women in the workforce if they can nurture? And this is just my thinking, and you could say you're naive or you live in small town South Dakota. Both probably true. But I do think there's a new wave of feminism that needs to happen, but I think it's going to happen.
So how does the new wave of feminism, what's at its mantle? What are they striving for? What are they going to try to achieve?
I think they've gotten so far away from who they really are, they just don't want it anymore. I think women are tired of being more like men because I think that's what happens. Question, have women become too much like men? I mean, they fought for certain rights, and I would stick up for those certain rights 60, 70 years ago. I think you would too, right? But what has turned out, or what has happened is, it appears to me they've become so much like men, they have lost their core belief of, or their purpose of who they really are. And that, again, is to be the nurturers of the word.
Well, and confused minds say no. They won't do anything.
Yeah, see, this is really obvious in Catholicism. And I would even say Christianity as a whole, but in Catholicism, you have Jesus, and then you have the people, right? God and the people. He gives of himself to us, right? He's the...
Sure. Yeah, he'd be the bridegroom.
He'd be the bridegroom, right?
Yep.
And he would give his seed to us, the church, and we would be feminine, right?
Right.
And we would receive him. So in Catholicism, and I would say even in your movements, it's all about receiving God.
Of
right?
course.
And we see this really...
Receive the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Receive his sacrifice, the Holy Communion we receive.
And we see this obviously in communion, because in the Catholic Church, you have communion too. In your church, you come up and you are receiving literally the seed. In the Catholic Church, you're receiving Christ. So you can be like Christ. You are what you eat, right?
Amen.
So I think women have probably worn the boots too much, the jeans and the belt, and I think they're sick of this pressure of having to go to college, get a career, then get married, and then have kids. I think they're sick of it, and they don't know how to get out of this trap because you have men and women in the workforce. And so the government is taxing the family twice instead of once. And there's this daycare, and they're in this rhythm, and I don't think they can get out of it.
No, I think you're absolutely right. If you look at Disney, for example, we've talked about them before, where they're marketing, where they're selling, where they're leading our children in the movies that they perpetuate and they push out there is nothing to do with having family. If you look at most of the modern programming coming out of Hollywood, Amazon, Netflix, even YouTube shorts and things like that, the male character is portrayed as either dumb or incredibly egocentric and not egotistical. Women are always seen as bright and cheery and problem solvers, and I mean, that really ties into some of their natural character, but then you see them bleed over into making the decision makers and being the ones that lead. And it's a disproportionate representation of our culture because marriage and relationships and men and women, there's a beautiful balance in both of our strengths and our weaknesses that makes receiving and giving the perfect analogy for this. I saw a YouTube short not too long ago, and maybe we'll put this one up too. Whatever you give a woman, they multiply. And especially in a marriage, it's incredible. Like you said, you give a woman your seed, she makes you a child. You give her groceries, she makes your family a meal. You give her a house, she makes a home. Like everything you give your woman, your wife, she multiplies. And I love this part because if you give her grief, she multiplies that too.
That is funny, but it is so true.
It is.
It is so true. And ladies, do you want men making a home out of a house? Do you want men raising your children? And now, could we do it? Yeah, but we're not nurturers.
No, not by design.
No.
And I think there's a horrible misconception, again, going back to some of the modern culture things that our children have been raised in, educated through in the public school system by just peer relationships, that a man is strong, a woman must be weak. Or the woman is strong, so the man must be weak. And that is not how it works. You ever seen a magnet? The North and the South Pole have equal strength. They're both strong, but they're strong in their own polarized direction. And that's what makes them work together and work in a unison and work to make an incredible compass or an incredible tool. And in a marriage, just because one is strong, the other shouldn't be weak. So if we've got single people or young people who are dating and looking at their future and who they're going to be locking in step with for their life, don't look to be the strongest. Look at your spouse and how do you make them strong with you and their strengths, because you both have blind spots. You both have weaknesses that, God willing, that's what you're marrying, is that person that's got your back and sees those blind spots and protects you just as you protect them. We talk about being men who provide for our families. Okay? Our women multiply what we give them to give us all of the joys in our life, whether it's children, a meal, a home, vacations, time, peace, presence. So the new feminism movement, how do they deal with this horrible discussion that we're talking about, people being non-binary and transgender? How do you in the new feminism, how do they deal with that? Because they got people who are attacking them and coming in on their turf.
That's a great question. I don't know how to answer it. But what were you saying earlier about men and women reminds me of this G.K. Chesterton quote. I love G.K. And for some reason, he's been speaking to me. But he says, quote, "We men and women are all in the same boat upon a stormy sea. We owe to each other a terrible and tragic loyalty," unquote. And it's really true. And I love the analogy of the magnets. You know, if you situate them a certain way, they're attracted and they're strong together. But if not, they're in
repel each other.
They're in conflict. And I think what's happened the last, particularly 60 years, is feminism has done that, has confused the roles of husbands and wives. Now you have the question, different questions like binary and how people identify. Although I think a lot of that is, this is going to sound extreme, ladies and gentlemen, but satanic.
No, that's not extreme. That's reality, because anything outside of God's design, God made man, pulled a rib, pulled a bone, created his wife. He made a giver and a receiver. That's been from the beginning. There's no question about it. So
to answer your question about how do you deal with that, I think the one way to deal with that is to live out your Christianity the way God intended in the first place. Male and female, you get married and you have kids. And wives, if you can, and many of you can, stay at home and be the nurturers of those kids. And from the outside, from people looking on the outside, will see you radiate beauty. You know, the transcendental is good, truth, good, and the beauty. They'll see that and they'll say, I want that. I was at my niece's graduation party this weekend, and I had the chance to see my first cousin. It was really good to see him. So Kenny and I were chit-chatting about this and that, and my son's going to leave the house in a couple of years, and he's got one.
God willing.
He's got two, yeah. Well, I think he will. But he's got now two that will be gone in here in another few weeks. And I said to him, how does that work? I mean, did you want your oldest son to go? I mean, I can't imagine you did, but... And he's like, well, no, but yeah, it was time for him to go. But you know what he does? Every weekend or every chance he gets, he comes back and has a meal with us. And he always says to us, this is what I want right here in this home. I want what you guys have and what I have here. This is what I want for my future. And I should have told Kenny this, but he's done a really, very good job. So you model it and people see the beauty. Just like we men will look at a beautiful woman and say, woo, she's beautiful. But we will also say to a woman, and depending on what she's wearing, we'll say, oh, she can be sexy. Mm-hmm. What do you want? Do you want sexy or do you want beauty? Because when you get sexy, then you don't get the best characteristics of a man that comes out.
That's right.
You get the worst.
That's
but
right.
If you get beauty, then you've got us. Because the reality is, even though in matrimony we are equal, but at some point somebody's got to make a decision, so the man steps in. But the reality is, the reason that is because we'd be slaves otherwise.
That's right.
It's really true.
That's right. No, you're exactly right. And I find that very interesting because you talked about the characteristics of between men and women. And what's that list again? How does that go? Men are
into things.
Okay.
Women are into persons, humans.
People. That's why they make good nurturers.
Men are remote, women are immediate. Men have ends, goals, and purposes. Women have proximate, close, they're near and dear, things near and dear to them. We're so different.
We are. I mean, almost like the magnet thing. We're really polar opposite, but it's the exact perfect complement to what makes a home and a life balanced. So back to this new feminist movement. Does that begin in the home? Is that a movement or a warfare that's starting in the modern Christian home? Is it something that is happening culturally throughout, women recognizing, and maybe this is why we're seeing some of the labor shortages that they talk about all the time on the news about, the service industry is missing out because pre-pandemic we had all this help and women working 2 extra jobs outside of the home while the husband's working his 40 hours or 50 hours and women going and getting jobs on the weekends to supplement the family income. And now post-pandemic, a lot of those women, after having been home during lockdown, haven't gone back into the workforce. Is that really where this war started?
I don't know.
What are your thoughts? What do you think? Does it make sense? Is that illogical?
It makes sense, okay. Especially when we were locked in our homes. I mean, people started to think differently. Like, wow, I kind of like hanging out with my kids, and wow,
teaching it wasn't that hard.
No, it wasn't that hard at all. And wow, they can actually take online classes and do just as well, if not better.
And had more free time and could play and they could do stuff together.
Yeah, that was really a gift. That could have been maybe the impetus for this idea of a new feminism. That could be it. I don't know. But it's just kind of been in my back of my mind, even in my prayer life. It's time, and it is time for a new feminism.
Is Jamie leading this?
She could be.
I think Trista would be on board.
Most women that I know would be completely on board. Mm-hmm. Most of them I know. There's very few that would say,
but we run in very narrow circles.
That's true too.
Very, very like-minded people who have common goals in life and common beliefs.
I do run into people. There's some in my family that would say you're just old-fashioned. Well, what's wrong, first of all, with being old-fashioned? It worked for many hundreds and thousands of generations before us. Is this working? So I'm okay with being calling old-fashioned.
And I wouldn't call you old-fashioned. I would call you traditional. And what is at the foundation of the word traditional? Tradition. And what are traditions by Webster's dictionary definition? A series of events or activities that are of deep ancestral or historical relevance. Why do we still hide a pickle in our Christmas tree?
Who does that?
We do.
A pickle.
A pickle. Goes back to my great-great-great-grandfather because he was German and that was the thing. You hid a pickle in the Christmas tree. Why? I don't know. But it's a thing. And lots of German families do that. They hide a pickle in the Christmas tree.
Never heard of that.
My one aunt, she took it so far as all of the pickles, she had wooden pickles made that had numbers on them. And you went to the tree and you picked the pickle off the tree and then you opened up your pickle and then whatever number it was the order in which you got to open Christmas presents.
Oh. Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, but yeah, tradition has worked. There's a reason why it was. It was before there was a scientific process. Getting married in this way or having children during this time of life worked. It is not traditional for someone at 50 years old to have babies. Do people still do it? Sure, but there's a lot of medical risks that come with it. Is there a tradition a couple hundred years ago that at 13 you sent your daughter off and got her married? Sure, because biologically that was kind of the time that they were ready to become mothers. So there's lots of things that have come down through tradition that have worked for thousands of years, and some things as we've progressed as a culture realized maybe there's a little better way to do it, but it still comes down to what we talked about last week on our podcast. Family, that core unit, but God was first to make the family whole and solid, and then to our extended family, and then into our country. And if you want a good country, you got to have a good family. A good family, you got to have a great relationship with God. It's how it flows. That's tradition.
Yeah, tradition is boys wouldn't be boys anymore; they'd be men. And again, this is another podcast topic, but when my boys turn 13, they're men in this household. That's how I treat them. You're a man now.
You know how the Blackfeet did it? The Native American Blackfeet? So at that certain age, 13, 14, they took the boy out into the forest. And there was a certain place in the forest with a stump, and they blindfolded him. And they told him that in order at sundown, you're a boy. At sunrise, you're a man. And they would blindfold him, and he would have to sit there blindfolded on the stump. Well, back in the day, a forest was kind of a scary thing. Bears, maybe mountain lions, maybe
chimpanzees,
something like that. But I mean, any number of predators that could come and kill this little boy, let alone other tribes and other factions that were warring against the Blackfeet, looking to eliminate anybody they could. And so this little boy would have to sit in the dark to become a man. Like that was his rite of passage. And at sunrise, he could take his blindfold off. And if he survived the night, then he'd go back to the tribe and he would prove that he made it. But what was really interesting is in that tradition, what the boy was found out every morning when he took that blindfold off is that there, sitting beside him in complete silence, but in ever-present, ready for protection, was his father. And his father just sat there quietly and never said a word. And I thought that's such a great connection with our Heavenly Father of how we don't hear him, and you hear those conversations of he doesn't talk to me, or I don't see him, and he hasn't done any great miracles or works like I read about the Bible. So he doesn't exist. And it's like us, if we just take that blindfold off and we paid attention to the little things, God's there protecting you all the time. Like he's there. And then for this feminist movement, I think that's God acting in the hearts of our women to recognize there's a tradition there that has worked for thousands of years and has worked since I created this universe to propagate and to fulfill this world. Let's get back to that because it worked.
So let's get back to men and women.
Oh, jeez.
When I grew up, the men would do things together and then the women would do things together. There was true brotherhood and sisterhood. Now there's been this androgynous movement that is from the pit of hell and has been working quite well, since, I don't know, it's probably starting in the 80s, even maybe even the 70s. Maybe even the 70s, because I think it was John Wayne who said by 1970, there was a huge shift in the way the world did things. So we have to reclaim our identity as sons and daughters of God the Father, men being masculine, women being feminine, and what that looks like. And ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know what to do, in your prayer time, ask God to show you a married couple that exudes true masculinity. I worked out too hard. I can't speak. And femininity. And watch how they complement one another. And their kids just kind of follow right in. Mm-hmm. And if you want stability for your kids, husbands, love your wives. Hug them.
And in that, teach, show, educate. A leader knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. And as a leader of your household, as a father in your marriage, it isn't a dictatorship with your wife. It's a partnership. Two strong people, two strong opposing forces making best decisions, but still bonded together to create that environment where the strengths of each other both emanate from your given strengths. And sure, my wife is way better with finances and money than I am, but she doesn't make financial decisions without me. We make those together. And a lot of times I've got a better vision or a better long-term plan for the family, and she lets that vision be part of the financial decision. But it isn't one and alone. And we make our kids part of those conversations so that they can see that. We got to get stronger and better with our prayer life to show them that God's at the center, but we'll get there.
So, ladies and gentlemen, remember this. For those Bible-believing people like me, in Ephesians, Jesus says, well, St. Paul wrote it, but God says, men and women, be submissive to one another. It says it first, and then it goes on to outline, okay, men, you do this, and women, you do this. But their submissiveness begins in the beginning because you need each other. You need that complementarity. Men maybe have to make more decisions, bigger decisions, like finances or housing or jobs and careers and ends, goals, and purposes. But women, you're much stronger when it comes to matters of the children.
Well, we don't get to dictate what they put in their bodies during their pregnancy. We can encourage and we can hope, but at the end of the day, those women have to make those decisions of how they're going to nourish that child before, during, and after they get here.
So Jim Gaffigan, and I'm going to put a link in this video here, speaks about how amazing women really are. And it's incredible when you think about, what do we men do? Okay, so we give our part, but what do the women do? Grow a baby, and then they have a baby, and then they feed a baby. And we men are just like, well, how do you do all that? We don't know.
Right.
So it's time for women to reclaim feminism.
Yeah. I mean, they've earned it. It's been imprinted in them since the day they were created.
It's who they are. It's their fingerprint.
Yeah.
Final thoughts.
God never made a mistake. And I think when in our crazy modern culture where mental uncertainty, fear, anxiety, all these things that come out of a lack of purpose and foundation and belief in something bigger and greater than yourself. So I have to be the biggest, greatest, most important centered thing in the life, that people are missing that God's blessed them with an incredible role to fill, and that it wasn't a mistake. Like, God didn't make you a girl to have you become a boy because he made you wrong. You just probably don't understand yet what his purpose is for you. And I'd argue that it's probably because you haven't had a relationship with to say, God, why'd you make me this way? I mean, I'm thankful every day for how God has made me, because it makes me really good at using his gifts that he's given for me. Did I understand at 16 how my gifts would be given? No. Did I understand at 28 how my gift would be used? No, but I started to tap into it at about 30 of what God's real gift was to me and what he had put into me to give the world. And I'm thankful every day that this is the way he made me. And it's not perfect, but it really works well for what I do for his kingdom. And if you find that purpose and that higher calling and that direction to look up instead of down, our women have an incredible opportunity to create the next generation and to really guide, again, capitalizing on what we talked about last week, creating a better country for us in the next generation.
So here's my takeaway. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're in a marriage and you are both spouses are working and the men are thinking, geez, I think my wife should probably be at home, and the wives are thinking, yeah, but how do we do this? The answer is, I don't really know, but I know someone who does know. God will find a way to work it out. And for those other couples who are getting married and having babies, you say, well, you can't make it today. You can't make it today. Well, we do. I've got some siblings. The women stayed at home.
I got a school teacher that I'm taking care of right now. She's quitting her job at the end of the school year. She's got 2 weeks left because she's had a baby during the school year. At the end of the month, when she calculates out what she makes as a teacher to what daycare is costing, she's making $12 a week. She goes, I can stay home and take care of and raise my child for $12 a week.
Right. So there's a way. There's a way to do it. Yeah, you might not get the boat and the house you want,
Your neighbors have one.
but who cares? You know, when I want to go boating, usually somebody calls me and say, "Hey, you want to go for a boat ride?" Yeah. And after I get one or two out of the way out of the summertime, I'm good.
That's right. Okay.
So listen, ladies and gentlemen, remember you are loved, and may God strengthen
The bars
of
of
your
your gates.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Glen Gower Podcast, sponsored by Mission Blueprint. Mission Blueprint is a nonprofit ministry started by Glen and Jamie to sanctify the family. Our income is donation-based, and we need your help. Please support us financially by going to www.mission-blueprint.org and be a part of our financial team. Thank you, and may God strengthen the bars of your gate.